Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's special spring game review edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted Tuesdays in the off-season and twice during the regular season. Huddle features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this special edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and give you the latest USC Trojans football news. Let's now meet Tuesday's panelists, a WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's The Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways. In addition to regular season football and basketball reports, he also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC. That's Marc Kulkin, the editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, columnist, national recruiting guru, and a graduate of USC. Erik McKinney, a former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column Musings with Arledge, in his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge Solo Edition. He's a graduate of the USC Law School. He's Chris Arledge. And a programming reminder note, this week on Musings with Arledge Solo Edition, Chris's guest will be from the USC Information Science Institute, Dr. Jeremy Abramson, who studies, teaches, and writes on sports analytics. And finally, a WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays The Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday special edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's an update in USC football news. On Saturday afternoon in the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, before an announced crowd of 23,241 and a national audience on the Pac-12 networks, Lincoln Riley's 2023 USC Trojans held their annual spring game. Defense came away with a 42-34 victory. Leading the way on Saturday for the Trojans were a host of impressive newcomers, coming in the form of portal transfers and spring freshman enrollees. We'll have an in-depth look at the spring game coming up shortly. At halftime of the spring game, the Heisman Trophy Trust presented USC a replica of the 2022 Heisman Trophy, won by returning All-America quarterback Caleb Williams. This replica trophy will be placed, like the others, inside Heritage Hall. The NCAA transfer portal window opened on Saturday and will continue to be open through April 30th. As of last week, the only known Trojan portal transfers at this time were offensive lineman Cortland Ford, defensive back Joshua Jackson Jr., and walk-on quarterback Keegan Patterson. In terms of potential incoming portal transfers, continue to check with WeAreSC.com, as it appears USC is positioned to potentially get some very high-profile help along the defense and offensive lines. The Trojans also announced on Friday the launch of a new USC NIL collective called the House of Victory. House of Victory is the first NIL sponsor of USC Athletics, having signed a corporate partnership with Playfly Sports, USC's executive multimedia rights holder. Friends, WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. And we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued, greatly appreciated. And you can also listen to Inside the Trojans Huddle on many available podcast sites. And a reminder, WeAreSC.com is offering a spring ball subscription special. You can get all the WeAreSC.com premium content for just $29.99 up to August 31st, 2023, or 4 months for just $10. So with that, let's get started. Panel, here's the first half kickoff. Today's special edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, we review Saturday's spring game by position groups, both offensively and defensively. But before we kick off, a look at the offense. We'll start with the offense and the quarterbacks. But here's the initial question. Panel, what did you think of Saturday's Coliseum attendance numbers and the overall atmosphere? And please tell it like it is. Marc Kulkin, I know you were there. You were sitting next to me in the press box. I know you have some thoughts on this, so lead us off here.
Yeah, I thought the atmosphere for the, or whatever the actual number was, 23,000, 25,000, I thought that was great. Really disappointed with only that number, whatever it was, showing up. If we're using the 25,000 number, that's 8,000 less than last year. Lincoln Riley's first year. That was before Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy that he was presented at halftime this year. And USC did a fairly good job of marketing this year's game. So it's not like people didn't know what was happening. I don't know. It just continues the idea that USC fans in general are apathetic. And, you know, I get it. It was a spring game. There's not a lot to get, but it was free. And you know, we've talked about this in the past. You're going to have limited opportunities to see Caleb Williams this year. You might as well take advantage of every single one of them.
Oh, we really had a limited opportunity to see Caleb Williams in the spring game, but we'll
I mean,
talk about that in a bit.
Maybe they knew more than we did going in that he was only going to get take 3 snaps.
Apparently so. There must have been somebody that was doing some espionage work. Chris, Arledge, your thoughts on the attendance and what you perceived as the overall atmosphere. I know you were planning on going, but had to watch the game at your residence out there in Dallas, Texas. But how did it come across over on television? What were your thoughts on that?
Well, it seemed fine on TV. USC is not a program that's going to have 50, 60, 70,000 fans for a spring game. They didn't win when Pete was at the top of the world. In fact, I think that the attendance this week is probably better than what Carroll usually got at his spring games. So that's just not going to happen. I'm more concerned about the atmosphere on game day at the Coliseum, which, if we're going to be honest, is often lacking because USC fans don't always show up. And when they do show up, they tend to sit and they're very quiet. But that's a complaint for another day. So, I think the attendance was fine. It was more than I'd predicted. I think I had said 18,000. So 23,000 seemed pretty good to me. And for USC, that's not a bad number.
Erik, what was that a good number for you, 23,000, or did you expect more or less?
It was fine. I mean, USC fans don't come to spring games. They don't. They won't. They haven't. They won't in the future. This is what it is. So, good crowd. The crowd that was there was loud and enjoyed it, I'm sure. That's the group that will come to spring games this year, next year, year after. If they win a national championship, that's it. They're not going to sell out the Coliseum for a spring game. Again, you're talking about now, what does it look like in the fall? Do people show up? But even at the end of last year, I mean, that Notre Dame game wasn't all that close to a sellout. And that's when you're playing potentially to go to the playoff. I mean, it takes a while for USC fans to really get out there and get truly involved in this. So no, that's kind of what the thought was going in, that it would be around that number. And honestly, that it's that number is impressive. Over 10, over 15, I think is a pretty good spring ball based on what we've seen the last 20 years of those things.
No, I think that's a really good point. I've been going to so many of them, you kind of judge each one unto itself. I will say this. I thought the crowd was enthusiastic. The band was there in full force. I appreciated that. They played like it was a regular game. I started saying to myself, they probably like sitting by the side of the end zone like that more than sitting behind the end zone in the peristyle end. But I will say this. I don't think the spring game was promoted as strongly as it should have been. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the first spring game with Lincoln Riley, they were giving out T-shirts and the DJ was there. There was no DJ there. There was no free T-shirts to my knowledge. Okay. And I think there's still a lot of people that haven't gotten over the taste of the last 10 years. I think they're watching them, that I know, but the question is what's going to motivate them to come to the Coliseum? I think if SC starts off 6-0, they're going to get that itch somewhere within those 6 games that I want to go see this team. But I don't think they can rely solely on just the attraction of Caleb Williams. I think that they have to be more than that. And I think that the promotions department has to really make an effort to get fans to want to go and remember what it was like to go to an SC game. And a lot of it's towards older fans who I think basically are saying, I'm just going to stay home. I love them. I'll watch them. But overall, I thought the atmosphere was good. All right. So with that, let's get into it. Panel, let's start with the offense and talk about the quarterbacks. So here's the format here. Did you find their performances beyond expectation, status quo, or underwhelming? What did you see looking at the quarterback position? Which quarterback impressed you and why? Marc Kulkin, your answers, please.
Caleb looks good. I don't think any of us anticipated him playing 3 plays. So from what we saw, he looked fantastic. He threw 2 really solid passes. And then we had a really good time to sit back and judge Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson. So when Chris talks about, the gap between Caleb Williams and Miller, and Caleb Williams versus any quarterback in the country, which he's absolutely correct, the difference is the gap between Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson is just as big, maybe bigger.
Agree.
And that's okay. That's fine. So anybody who's thinking that, Malachi is the future next year, let him catch up to Miller Moss because he's got a long ways to go. I mean, he was throwing passes that even in high school, you're telling a quarterback, don't throw that ball. So maybe it was a little bit of panic, maybe first time on the big, on the big stage with fans out there. I don't hold anything against what I saw from the freshman, but there is a definite pecking order. It's Caleb Williams, it's Miller Moss, and then after that, if it ever gets to that point, Lincoln Riley has to decide: do I want to burn Malachi's red shirt, or do I want to put Jake Jensen in there, who looks very capable of handling the offense if it gets to his position? What I really liked, what I saw that intrigued me, was Miller Moss showing off some wheels and taking off. At one point, I was like, what? Stick that Kenny Pickett leg in the ground and keep going. But obviously, they were under orders that once you get in the vicinity of a defensive player, you're down. So,
Mark, let me ask you a question. This goes for Chris and Eric as well, so feel free to add it on to your comments. Do you think that Caleb Williams should have done more than just play in one series? Like for the fans that wanted to see him play, do you think that he should have played 2 or 3 series, or do you think it wasn't necessary?
One series more would have been fine. Like Lincoln said after the game, you're not going to get anything out of Caleb in this game that's going to improve him in the fall, September, October, November. So I've said it. Spring camp is you're trying to evaluate who can play in the fall. He knows Caleb can play in the fall. So yeah, one more series would have been fine. After that, big deal.
What did you think, Chris?
Oh, Jake Jensen looked pretty good. He was moving around pretty well, threw the ball with authority. Look, there is an enormous gap between Caleb Williams and everybody else, and there would be a pretty big gap between Caleb Williams and the second best quarterback in college football. Anybody not named Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, there's probably going to be a big gap. With Caleb Williams, USC is a playoff contender. Without him, they're a team they'd have a good quarterback. Miller Moss is a good player, I think, and he'd be surrounded by really good players, and they'd still win quite a few games, but it wouldn't be the same team, and we all know that. Malachi Nelson is a true freshman who should still be in college. He's been limited physically for some time. I'm not surprised that he didn't look great, and I wouldn't expect him to look great. He'll be fine. And I think Miller Moss will be fine. But right now those guys are fine. Caleb Williams really, really has to stay healthy. I mean, that's the number one. Lincoln Riley has to continue to stay alive, and Caleb Williams has to stay healthy. Those 2 things are really the 2 keys to this season.
No question. As someone who watched the game at home, did you feel that you wish he could have been in another series just to watch him?
No. Well, look, I always want to watch Caleb Williams. He's spectacular, but the point of the spring game is not to bring enjoyment to the viewers. It's to help the team prepare. And This is their first chance to play in front of people and television. And I suspect that Malachi Nelson and probably Miller Moss are a little bit nervous about that. They haven't done a ton of it. For Caleb Williams, I don't, it's probably like getting up in the middle of the night to go get something out of the fridge. But for those other guys, it's a big deal. And so I think that's what's important. And those other guys need reps. And if you're only going to play 2 quarters, they're limited reps. So I had no problem with them taking him out when they did.
All right, Eric, did the quarterback performances go beyond expectation, status quo, underwhelming? How did you see it? And again, would you have liked to have seen Caleb in 1 or 2 more series, or was it not necessary?
I mean, to go backwards in all your questions, no, it wasn't necessary. Yes, I would have liked to have seen him play the whole game. I mean, again, I want to watch Caleb Williams take as many snaps as possible in the Coliseum, but it's a right. So I think the way to look at the spring game, where when fans are there and it's kind of this is your first and only time to see them, you want it to be a game, but in reality, it's one of 15 practices that USC gets in the spring, and they've decided to make the 15th one a spring game. You don't have to do it. You don't have to have a spring game. You can just use it as a 15th practice. So these coaches, what we know about Lincoln Riley is he's not going to throw away opportunities. So he's not going to take one of his spring practices and say, oh, whatever, we can just do whatever with it. Like he wants to get the guys better that he feels like he needs to get better. That's why you're not going to see a lot of Caleb Williams. Even during the open, going back to when they had the open practice to media, it was a lot of the other 2. I mean, that's kind of what you have to do. You need to keep Caleb Williams sharp and continue progressing him in the areas he needs. But in a situation like that, no, the other 2 need the reps. And I think we saw that. They need those. They need to feel comfortable in that offense. And as far as how they perform, that's them right now. I don't think it was surprising either way. Malachi Nelson, this is his first spring in college. He's going to throw high school passes. He needs to see those. I think he needs to see Christian Pierce come over the top and intercept that ball to know, okay, I can't do that. And again, that's one practice of 15. He's seen it throughout spring. He's getting an idea, but you got to unlearn a lot of stuff that you got away with in high school and how to do different things at this level. I think Miller Moss is fine. I think the idea that, again, you're going to take years of development and 14 practices and say, no, the limited snaps he got in that spring game are everything that he is as a quarterback right now. It's clear the players feel comfortable with Miller. They like kind of his development. The coaches like where he's going. I think he's a solid option. There's a lot of walk-on receivers out there and mix and matching and putting different guys out there. It's not like Miller ran out there with the first offense on every single snap and it was full go, high intensity, the entire time. Totally comfortable kind of with Miller right now, but Chris is right too. You don't want to go into this year knowing, okay, Miller Moss is your 1A quarterback. No, you feel comfortable with Caleb Williams right now at the top and what he can do.
I thought that for the most part, first of all, Caleb was Caleb. I mean, that first drive of 3 or 4 plays was like swoosh. I mean, you start saying, is that the first string defense? Which defense is out there? Last year's defense. So it's kind of like kind of a cold water being put on your head. Obviously, Caleb, I think I would have liked to see him just one more series myself. I thought Miller Moss showed that he can be efficient running this offense. He's confident. He's obviously improved. Malachi Nelson played to me like a true freshman. It's what I actually expected to see. Some good moments, some not so good moments. I think he caused 3 of the 4 offensive turnovers. I thought Jake Jensen looked actually pretty good if he's going to be the 4th-string quarterback. So they're not hurting there. So that's a good sign. So let's move on. Panel, let's look at the running back position. Did you find their performances beyond expectations, status quo, or underwhelming? What did you see looking at the running back position? Which backs impressed you and why? Marc Kulkin?
Just because of what the freshmen did, they went beyond my expectation. I kind of anticipated what we were going to get from Marshawn Lloyd. But when he had that really special run, it was probably I would say the play of the game. That was my wow moment on offense. You know, I don't know. We knew what we had with Austin Jones coming in. So being able to actually see Marshawn Lloyd compete, he brings an added element to this team. It's now not just Caleb Williams and his legs and his ability to throw the ball. You have a legitimate, strong running back there that not only can run between the tackles, but he can make people miss in open space as well. He's a unique talent. He's one of those types of guys that you go, okay, we have to game plan for him by himself. So yeah, the running backs are going to add a whole nother element to this year's offense. Last year, Travis Dye, he was just more of a workman-like guy. Marshawn Lloyd is more of that home run hitter. So it went beyond my expectations with the running back group.
Chris, what about you? Did it go beyond your expectations? Status quo? How'd you see it?
No, I thought it was. I thought coming in it was going to be a good group, but yeah, I think they exceeded expectations. We only saw really the one play from Lloyd. That's all I needed to see. He can do things that last year's backs can't do. And Austin Jones is a good football player, and he's tough, and he runs physical. And if there are 6 yards to be gotten, he's going to get you 6 yards. Austin Jones can't do what Marshawn Lloyd can do. And if Lloyd stays healthy, he's going to get the bulk of the carries because he can be a legitimate threat to make people miss and cause big plays. Both freshman backs look great, which I thought they would. I don't know that, I'm not sure that Joyner looks physically impressive, but this is a kid that Nick Saban wanted, and you can see why. I mean, he can run the football, and I don't know if Ray Leak is if we're going to call him a running back or if we're going to call him a receiver. Both the plays he made that stand out in my mind were plays he made as a receiver. But Ray Leak has grown up a little bit, and I think he'll probably get some time in the backfield. But fighting Damani Jackson for the ball downfield, the cut he made where he almost broke, I think it was Tacky Curse's ankles and got upfield, was impressive. That kid's a weapon. And if he's playing like that, he's going to get his reps somewhere, probably some in the backfield and some with the slot. But no, that's a really good group of players, a really good group. And I'm excited to see how the young guys develop.
Erik, your thoughts?
Yeah, this was the best group of the day for me. I mean, and maybe not by a small margin. I mean, we talked about Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones. They touched the ball 2 times and had 44 total yards. Like those guys can play. Marshawn Lloyd is more, when you talk about the 3 kind of veteran additions with him and Austin Jones and Travis Dye last year, Marshawn Lloyd, I think, is probably far and away the most just pure talented guy. And that's the way teammates have talked about him. And what he can do is different than what those other guys can do. Now, there's knowing assignments and there's blocking and there's all of that kind of stuff that Travis Dye proved early on that he could do, and Austin Jones did as well as the year went along. So those are questions that you need answers. It's clear the coaches know enough about Marshawn Lloyd. Hey, here's your touch. Come on out. They didn't run him through the tackles. They didn't put a big workload on him. I mean, that he's a guy that's clearly kind of proven himself throughout spring for what he can do. But it was the 2 freshmen that stood out. I don't think you need them right now, but it has been a long time since USC has recruited running backs that have gone all the way through their USC careers on this roster and really contributed to USC. Now, you're always going to kind of look in the transfer portal and whatever and that kind of stuff, but these 2 look like just long-term stars for USC. And Chris, you mentioned Quentin Joyner's kind of stature. I don't think he's ever going to be, and I wrote about this, he's never going to be the anythingest, right? The biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the whatever. He's just a pure running back. He knows how to move. He knows how to get in the open field. He knows how to take advantage of every available yard. And then Amarion Peterson is a bulldozer. That guy, and with the feet. I mean, Mark and I had talked, and the first guy, when I saw him come on the field for that very first spring ball practice, you can't help but think of Lendell White when you see him. And the numbers are weird because it's Joyner wearing 21 and not Peterson. It'd be helpful if they could switch, but Peterson has those kind of dancer's feet in that big bulldozer body. And he had one where a shifty move in the backfield, he had that hurdle downfield. So whatever happens this year, I think you're going to get it out of the veterans. But if you need to go to a fourth guy, or you need kind of some depth, or especially if you're running out kind of a blowout game, those two guys are going to be fun to watch right now. And I think have kind of that long distance, big time impact and stats ahead of them in their USC career. So no, for me, I think easily the best position group from the spring game.
Yeah, I thought the running backs, after you really see them perform in the flesh, I thought they went beyond my expectations. I think the way they played Lloyd was an indication that he's going to be right there as a potential co-starter, if not a starter at some point. I think also another thing that I looked at was that, we tend to forget about Austin Jones and how good he really is. And I think he showed that in that first drive. The freshman backs were exceptional. I think what I was really impressed by was the coaching style of Kyle McDonald. His running backs, and he did this at Utah, they really are patient hitting the line of scrimmage. They really wait for the blocks to form. And for true freshmen to get a handle on that style, most of them, they want to hit the hole and get to the end zone as quickly as possible. I was really impressed with their patience. I don't know if I would call it surprising that Rayleigh Brown didn't carry the ball as much as expected. I think it is perhaps where he's moving more slot than running back, which I think is understandable. A real question mark for me is, what is the future of Darwin Barlow? But I came to the conclusion after seeing it and then watching the replay a couple of times, I think Barlow will probably be the third back who can really do it. So this idea that maybe he's going to leave after spring ball, I'm not so sure that's going to happen. I think there is a place for him, and I think there's enough because, the course of a season, guys get hurt, and, and he could move right in. We saw what he did against UCLA. So, I think there is some bright moments for him in the future. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver position. Did you find their performances beyond expectation? Status quo, underwhelming? What did you see looking at the receiving core? Which receivers impressed you and why? Mark, what impressed you? What did you like? What did you not like?
Yeah, I'm pretty much down the middle on the wide receiver group. I almost want to lean a little bit to the underwhelming just because there were so many drops. But look, that's a talented group. We saw Zachariah Branch. I guess that we can call that his coming out party. Not only is he shifty and got a lot of finesse to his game, but look, Shane Lee might have been off balance, but he showed a lot of strength putting him on his backside with that straight arm. That wasn't on my bingo card with Zachariah Branch. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, that impressed me. Brendan Rice wasn't out there that often, had that nice catch to open the game. Mario Williams, touchdown. Kyron Hudson, look, they played with Caleb Williams for 3 plays, 2 passes. Everything else was Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson. So I guess maybe it's not fair to judge them, too harshly on their performance, but I didn't take a whole lot away from the wide receivers in the spring game, to be honest with you.
Chris, what did you take away from the wide receivers?
Yeah, I think those guys can play better than they did. Singer dropped some passes, and I think it was Singer that had the ball taken from him in the end zone for the pick. Zach Branch dropped a couple of balls. Yeah, I'm not sure one was his fault. But at the same time, there's so much talent there. I'm not the least bit worried about that group. And Branch, I was hoping that we would see him get in space and see his elusiveness. We didn't, but in some ways that made it more impressive. I know when that guy's in the open field, he can make people miss and outrun people. That's obvious. Ran a 10-200 meter. I mean, he can run. But he's also a guy that that if you get it to him at the line of scrimmage, will run hard like a running back and pick up 5 yards. So what's not to like about that kid? So, you know, it was not a huge performance by any of them, I don't think, but it's a great group. They're going to be great this year. And when they get Deuce Robinson, they're going to have yet another physical freak to put out there. So if with him and with Ray Leak maybe playing a lot more receiver than running back, with Zach Branch, with Dorian Singer, to go with the guys they already have, I mean, there are so many guys that can play out there, just so many. It's a pretty exciting group, even though I don't know that they were at their best the other day.
Erik, you wrote a really nice piece in which you pointed out that Zach Branch may have played a better game than people that watched him, because when you looked at the final statistics, you made some good points. Share that with us.
You're on mute.
I think it's what Chris said, right? Like you look at the stats at the end of the game and he has 8 catches for 94 yards. It's the quietest, like 8 catch, 94 yard performance I could think of. And again, it's the spring game. You're not seeing stats as it goes, and you're not playing a full game, but at the end of it, those are not the numbers that I would have guessed just kind of watching him. And I think it says a lot based on the fact that he didn't have these major explosive plays. He had one where he kind of leaked outside and got a little bit of a rub route, benefited from that and got downfield, and Miller Moss made a really nice throw to him. So yeah, you had kind of the one bigger play, but outside of that, it wasn't what you expect. When you think about him having a big game, right, it's getting loose and going for 75 yards. And that's, I think, what you expect, maybe a time or two as a freshman, and then more and more as he goes along in his career. But the fact that he can just kind of operate in the offense, catch a 7-yard pass, catch a 6-yard pass, catch an 11-yard pass, like do that kind of stuff, I think that elevates him in terms of really how much he can contribute this season and right now. He did have the drop, and Chris mentioned another one where, yes, maybe some miscommunication, a better throw probably gets him open on another one. So yeah, yards left out there and still that kind of performance. I think that was big, but I'm with them. Overall, the wide receivers, yeah, that's fine. That's a C from them, I would assume. And they'd probably all say that. Dorian Singer had a chance for like a big time touchdown catch on kind of an extended one hand thing that I honestly think he could make 7 out of 10 times, 6 out of 10 times. Then he dropped an easy one down the field, running down the sideline there. He did have one kind of in traffic on the sideline, and I think shows a little bit of what he can do. And that Caleb Williams, Brendan Rice connection right out of the gate, I think we're going to see that a little bit this year. So yeah, that the wide receiver spot at USC in this group especially, you're going to grade them on a curve. And so the fact that, you look at the numbers and the positive plays, but ultimately it's, you expect pretty close to perfection, I think, out of a group like this. And again, that was kind of pretty good for a group. But again, no, like what Chris said, there's no worry about kind of what those guys are going to do in the fall.
Yeah, I thought it was status quo with the receivers. I thought Branch made a nice debut in a quiet way, probably the way Lincoln Riley would actually want it to be, because there's no way Lincoln Riley was showing any cards in that game about what his receivers could actually do, and very close to the vest. And I don't think Dorian Singer had the game he would have wanted in his SC debut in the spring. But, you can't help but think that these guys were nervous, their first time, wearing a USC uniform in the crowd in the Coliseum. I think they did an interview, as I saw when I got home, that one of the players mentioned how I think it was a transfer, how excited he was to see the Coliseum torch, and he was in uniform. So really no worries there. I thought Mario Williams was ready to play, made a nice catch, and Rayleigh Brown from the slot, very intriguing. It's going to be interesting to watch his progress and how they use him during the regular season. All right, panel, here's I don't even know if it's worth discussing actually, but I'll just throw it out there. Did anything catch your eye beyond expectation, status quo, or underwhelming when you look at the tight end position? I don't even know if I can even expect you to answer this. Which tight end impressed you and why, Mark?
Did we use the tight end Saturday, Eric? Oh,
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how many plays there was actually tight end on the field. There was a lot of four wide sets with one back. So
a lot of
I
10
don't-
personnel, right?
no, I don't know. I don't know how much the tight ends actually played, but I can't remember a tight end play.
Well,
We're recruiting
So
the heck-
that's status quo. That's status quo for USC, I think.
We're recruiting the heck out of the position. That's the positive.
Yeah. Well, those guys may get on the field too. We'll see.
Eric, any thoughts, or are you simply saying, well, wait until they get more tight end recruits?
No, yeah. I mean, I assume they ran 5 plays in that spring game. I mean, like was mentioned, Lincoln Riley was not putting anything out there on film or anything like that. And so, no, I mean, I don't remember a tight end kind of jumping out and doing well. I'm sure, right? I'm sure if you watch film and get down into it and nitty gritty, there was some blocking going on and all that, but it's not as if we saw like power runs over and over and over anyway. So no, I'll say as expected.
Yeah, and I'll just neatly say there wasn't much to see. There's not much to comment. We'll see what happens in training camp. All right, let's move on here. What did you see about the offensive line positions? Did you find it beyond your expectations? Status quo, underwhelming? What did you see at the offensive line? Was there any lineman that you could tell that impressed you, and why, Mark?
I'd like to put the category of work in progress is where the box I'm checking off. It's I don't want to say it was underwhelming, but there's still a lot of work to be done there. And I think they're trying to find the right combination. I don't know. Do we want to break the news on this show that Ethan White isn't going to be a Trojan?
Well, if you're going to tell us that, then
well,
tell us what we don't know.
Out there on the interweb, so it's out there now. Look, the tackle positions are still being sorted out. They're working Michael Tarquin over there. They tried Elijah Page, got a lot of work during the spring game. There's a lot of potential there. Eric was trying to calm me down, saying, he's not ready yet. I say, what, at this point, and I know it's a gamble, but you work him, and you make him a major part of that rotation, kind of like they did last year, 1A with Cortland Ford and with Bobby Haskins. Until you find a solid left tackle, you don't have one, so you might as well continue to look for the future. We know we have Jonah Monheim and Justin Dietich. And Jared Kingston played really well at Washington State, but he's been playing guard. I don't know what the offensive line looks like. I know that it was probably a good thing that Caleb Williams only played 3 plays in that game, because had that been a really live game, the quarterbacks were running for their lives. I mean, there was at least 4 sacks in that game. So I don't want to come down too hard, but there was a lot. They look good running in the running game. They opened up holes, but there's a lot of uncertainty with the offensive line. There's no way to sugarcoat that.
Chris, you agree with Mr. Kulkin?
I think he's overstating how poorly the line played. I didn't think it was that bad. Look, the offensive line did not get dominated Saturday. You had a bunch of backups playing, right? It was one half of football, but they're shuttling in a lot of second team guys. I'm not worried about the offensive line. I think they're going to be fine. I think Mark's right that they're still trying to figure out some combinations. I think they're still trying to figure out who's going to play left guard. The guy may be in Houston right now. I don't know. I mean, so I think we're going to see some additions to that group before the fall, but they'll be fine. I think it's a good group. And the other thing is that Mark says it's a good thing Caleb Williams wasn't playing. Well, first of all, nobody's going to touch him, because I think if you touch him, lose your scholarship. But even apart from that, I don't know. I've seen plenty of games where guys were coming through clean from the backside and they didn't touch Caleb Williams. Hitting Caleb Williams is easier said than done until he pops a hamstring.
His wasn't a physical injury. It wasn't from contact, is what I'm trying to say.
No, well, it was from running. Yeah.
I don't need him being chased and popping a hamstring.
Well, if he's 60 yards downfield because he decided he was going to run for a touchdown, that might happen. I'm not sure I can blame that on Jonah Monheim. But look, the offensive line is going to be fine, and it takes some time to figure out. It takes some time to develop cohesion at an offensive line. So I'm not worried about it. I think we'll be good.
Erik, you think they're going to be good?
Yeah, I think all of the past history with Josh Henson and Lincoln Riley suggests they're going to figure this out, but it doesn't feel figured out yet. It doesn't feel, and the 5 guys that started there, they may end up starting the season, but it doesn't feel like it's okay. We're locked in. Everyone's playing together, and here we go. We're a dominant offensive line unit right now. I think those are some talented guys. There's a ton of experience still with this group starting there. There was talk about Jonah Monheim kind of moving inside, and we saw him out at tackle. He can play all those different positions. You're probably going to get a guy who comes in the transfer portal and seeing where that kind of shows up. I think it's interesting that so many of these guys have so much versatility that they can play so many different spots. It's almost like this kind of paradox of choice where, okay, we could look at 200 different formations with these 5, 6, 7 guys. How do we find the best one? You'd almost be better off if you're just locked in on one spot. Let's just get them good at those spots. And so eventually it'll come down to that, and they'll lock guys in, and they're going to be good. They're going to be good. I mean, these are big, strong guys. I think Jarrett Kingston is a solid addition. Jonah Monheim is very good. Justin Dietz is very good. I think Michael Tarquin will be interesting to see how he develops if he stays over at left tackle. That's not a spot he played a lot last year. And then can Gio Quinones take a big step forward? That's a huge hole with Andrew Voorhees not there. I mean, anybody, it's not quite Caleb Williams stepping down to whoever his backup or replacement next year will be, but again, that's a pretty big hole that you have to get fixed. So no, it wasn't a dominant showing by the offensive line. There's enough stuff out there though to believe, yeah, they're gonna get this figured out if it is those 5. I think there's a chance that you got somebody else coming in over the offseason and maybe a couple more bodies added up front. And I think you definitely have enough pieces for this to be more than an adequate offensive line. It's going to be a good group.
Yeah, I thought the offensive line to me was more about who lined up where than the actual performance and execution. I did come away knowing the Trojans have a really future star in true freshman tackle Elijah Page. He is a stud. He reminds me of, excuse me for being another oldie but goodie, of a player SC had many years ago named Keith Van Horn. Same body type. And the way I look at it is, knock on wood, that SC plays up to its capabilities the first 6 games, so that Page and a number of the players can work out their kinks and still win games, so that when the back half of the schedule hits, Page is more ready to play, because that will be obviously a very big step up. So I think the offensive line will be fine. It's going to be a physical group. And again, I think Chris has mentioned it. Look at when Caleb Williams is scrambling around in the pocket, as long as he doesn't get hit from the blind side, which doesn't seem to happen very often, and the left tackle can protect him, he makes up for a lot of things. All right, let's move on. Halftime. Here's an interesting thing that we kind of talked about in the press box. So I think it's a good conversation piece. As those of you that were at the Coliseum, and maybe you noticed it on TV, Chris, although there were no larger than life Heisman jerseys displayed in the peristyle end of the Coliseum for the spring game, if you were in charge during the regular season of putting the jerseys up, how would you arrange them and display them? How would you do it, Erik? What's it going to look like if you're in charge?
So I like the huge jerseys, under the peristyle, the way they've been, but you're running out of room. And so I don't like the idea of trying to cram them in. So we were looking at kind of the peristyle. I like putting them up over the arches, over the peristyle there. The other thing that I would do is every time those numbers appear, and that's in the sections, on kind of the entryways there, on the seat numbers, on anywhere, I'd put them in gold so that they kind of pop out. So that's all the Heisman jersey numbers, wherever they show up in a, whatever it is, a different font, a different color, something like that, just all over the stadium. But I like putting them on the peristyle. Again, if the Coliseum is USC's, then start permanently marking it, I think. And certainly that could be sacrilege to touch the peristyle and put stuff on there. I like them displayed like that only because, again, you're running out of room down there where they've typically been displayed.
Okay, and now Mark, you're the architect here. How are you going to arrange these jerseys? Are you going to make them smaller to fit them all in? What's your vision?
No, there's another area of the peristyle, kind of where, but the stands that they erect in the peristyle would block it off. There's those grass areas that I think would be able to accommodate each of the numbers. So you wouldn't have to shrink the jerseys, and you have enough room to add to USC's collection. So if you're going to go with the jersey motif, I would go there, and I would get rid of the, I don't know, what is it, the Trojan Nation, where they put the Spirit of Troy, which was interesting enough. At the spring game, they kind of came in and marched on the home field side of the stadium this year, as opposed to the visiting side. So I don't know, maybe they're planning to put the band over there next to the student section again. So if you get rid of the aluminum bleachers, use those grass sections that are lower in the peristyle, and start adorning the Heisman jerseys down there. And I would keep them in chronological order as far as who won it first, and then just keep working your way up. You need to make sure there's room for number 7 and number 8. Because there's going to be room for 9 and 10 coming up here shortly.
Chris, how would you display them?
I think I would put them at the top of the stadium, 4 on one side, 4 on the other, maybe. I don't know. I don't like the sun deck, as they used to call it, that Mark wants to pull out. I didn't like it when I've sat there before. It was awful. I actually kind of like having the band there, just because I think the acoustics are better. I mean, if you watch a concert at a venue like that, that's sort of where they're going to put the stage and the band. They're not going to stick them in on the side at the bottom and win some of the seats. The acoustics aren't as good. So, I don't care if the band can see the game effectively or not. That's not my concern. I just want them to be able to fill the stadium with noise. What I do think is important, though, is wherever they put Reggie's, and I think we're getting close to the point where they're going to start displaying number 5 Heisman and jersey again. I think by September that's going to happen. I think that wherever they put it, we should have a sign right below it that says NCAA, and have a sign right above it that's a big middle finger. And I think that's really important that we send that message. And I understand that it's a family event and that's going to create some awkward conversations with the young ones, but I think there's some things they need to learn about life, and this is probably the right time to teach them.
Like giving him the finger.
By giving the NCAA the finger. That's right, Greg.
Well done.
Not the children. We're not flipping off the kids. Is that what you're
No,
talking about?
I would never suggest that, of course.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think the first thing I don't want to do is cover up the peristyle arches and things. And I'll tell you why, because we were all having a meltdown, how bad it looked when they used to put up those corporate, I don't know what you would call them, double level stages, whatever, that were blocking the view. And I'd hate to see us go back to blocking the view in any shape or form. But if it was possible to display them all, I do think the time has come for Reggie Bush to have his name up there. He did win the Heisman Trophy. I did learn, and I think, Chris, you probably heard it on the Pac-12 networks, that they are going to put Caleb Williams' jersey up there because he won it. So that'll be a lot of fun to see a guy who's still on the field with his jersey up there. But I think they got to figure out creative ways, an alternate so that you get the same effect with the jerseys. If the peristyle and in that particular setting we've seen in the past doesn't quite work. So hopefully they'll get it right, but they need to really milk this 8 Heisman Trophy winners thing, so that when the television cameras pan the peristyle end, that's prominent for viewers across the country to see. All right, let's get to the second half. That means we're going to talk about the defense. Panel, what was your opinions of the defensive line position? Did you find their performance beyond expectations, status quo, underwhelming? What did you see looking at the defensive line positions, and which lineman impressed you and why, Chris Arledge?
I thought they were fine. This is, we're gonna spend an hour and a half talking, and this is the subject that matters most for the coming year. If these guys and whoever they pull out of the transfer portal play well in the fall, USC is going to be very difficult to beat. But Alex Grinch's defense assumes that these guys are going to be able to beat blocks and get in the backfield. And if they don't do that, then his defense is a disaster. Can we talk football for just a second?
Yes.
So you have the second play of the spring game is when Austin Jones goes around the right end for 20-something yards, right? Okay. So USC's playing man defense. Now, anytime you're playing man, you're not going to get much quick run support from the secondary because they're not looking into the backfield. They're looking at their guy. And by the time they know it's a running play, the guy's either tackled or he's in the backfield and there's grass all around, right? Okay. So you have 6 guys in the box. Those 6 guys have to stop the running play. They have 5 blockers, but they also have Caleb Williams. And because you have Caleb Williams, you always have to worry that he's going to keep the ball. That keeps a backside end or backside linebacker in place. He's effectively a blocker. So you have 6 blockers, you have 6 defensive guys. If you watch that play, and I watched it about 10 times this morning. So Solo's the left end, and he's slanting to the right. And Grinch loves to slant his line, loves it. But here's what happens. When he slants, instead of him controlling the edge, keeping his left arm free and forcing a play inside, instead, you're relying on the linebacker, Mason Cobb, to have contain to that side, which is a very difficult assignment for an inside linebacker, okay? Now, what happens is the pulling guard is responsible for blocking Cobb. The backside guard pulls. Cobb is trying to get to the mesh point. If he runs too hard, he gets kicked out. The running back cuts inside of it. If he doesn't get enough outside, then the running back's going to get outside. What has to happen on that play, I think, is Solo has to get penetration on his slant, because if he does, that pulling guard is going to run into trash, and he's never going to get to his position. And that means Mason Cobb is unblocked, and he's got a pretty good angle to pick up the back. But he wasn't unblocked. Solo got stuffed, and as a result of that, Cobb is trying to get to the edge, take on a block, and keep contained. He doesn't do it. What does all this mean to me? Well, here's what it means. Alex Grinch put Mason Cobb in a very difficult position. That's a tough assignment, okay? And he did it because he chose to slant instead of letting Solo have the C gap and keep contained, okay? And so he puts him in a very difficult position. He knows that he's not going to have any run support from the secondary who's playing man. He is counting on Solo getting upfield, I think, and getting in the way of that pulling guard. I think that's what he's counting on, because if that's not what he's accounting on, I don't understand that setup. If those guys don't get penetration, USC is in trouble this year. One more play. This was the big run by Quentin Joyner when he takes it down inside the 10, 15. I can't remember exactly what it is. So Corey Foreman he's playing the stand-up edge on that play. Played a lot of that in this game, despite all the talk about having a hand in the dirt. His hand wasn't in the dirt very often. Corey Foreman is unblocked. He does a nice job. He shuffles down. He keeps his shoulders square, and he's really in a position to make the play. But and there are 3 defensive players and only 2 blockers, because you have Shane Lee and you have Mason Cobb and you have Corey Foreman, and you have 2 guys to block him. Now what happens is that the second running back, I don't think it was Barlow. I think it was Peterson, the freshman. I could be wrong. It was one or the other. He comes and takes on Corey Foreman in the hole, and Foreman catches the block, gets his shoulders turned, and he's out of the play. Now, if Corey Foreman does what you would expect an edge / defensive lineman to do, and blows that running back up in the hole, that play goes nowhere. But he doesn't. He plays it soft and he catches it, and he's out of the play. Shane Lee then doesn't run to grass. Sometimes you tell the linebackers to run to grass. Why? Because the grass is where the running back will be. You run to grass. He sees something, I don't know what it is he sees, and he momentarily ducks inside and then can't get back out and make the play. Mason Cobb, who has the C gap, actually does a nice job of setting the edge, but the other 2 guys screw up the play, and it goes. Now, again, what has to happen there? You have to have that unblocked edge guy be a football player and make a play. You cannot allow, this isn't Tom Rathman, it's not Moose Johnson, it's not a 250-pound blocking fullback, it's a freaking halfback, and I think a freshman halfback. You have to blow that guy up in the hole and you kill the play. If USC does not get good play from its front 4, it will be bad defensively again. That's the reality. And we saw some good play. I thought Solo played pretty well. I thought Dejon Benton played really well. Actually, he was aggressive. He was physical. He was getting upfield. So I think they're better there. I think they're bigger. I think they're more athletic. I don't know, guys. We'll see. I think the defense will be better because they have better players. But look, those guys have to make plays. And Grinch is counting on them to make plays, because if they don't, he's going to put all of his back 7 in terrible positions. That's just the way it is.
Well, is that the way it is? Eric, what did you see on that defensive front?
No, that's it. Chris said it. I gave him all my time ahead of time secretly, and he took it. No, he's right. And
guys, excuse me, Eric, did you notice, guys, that last time I was talking last show, Eric said, well, it took Greg 4 minutes to get to the point.
I didn't say that.
Now, come on.
Now
you're timing for Chris. Chris was giving us an excellent dissertation on how it should work.
I'm saying I appreciate it. I'll give Chris all my time on all the categories going forward. No, and so I think what that comes down to, right? Like people crush Alex Grinch for his stuff. There are so many times you go back to last year where truly the guy is there. Truly, the guy is there. However it's designed, there were some where you see everybody sort of slanting and moving, and it's like everyone went out of the play just based on you got caught in a bad call, and this thing went this way, and everyone's over here, and some guy had no chance to make it. There were so many times last year where truly there was a guy or 2 or 3 there to make the play and didn't make the play. Some of it, I think, like what Chris is pointing to, is attitude. If you're bigger and you're stronger, play like it. Play like when you get off the bus, you're going to run away with the game the way Georgia did against TCU. When things started rolling, it was done. It was done from when they showed up and walked on the field. And USC's defensive line has to get there. It's a little bit like the offensive line right now. I think there's a chance you bring some new guys in, you keep developing. We're only halfway to kind of when you need to start playing the season. You get another sort of conditioning session, another fall camp. But right now, the way it looks like it could be certainly better than last year, but not to where you're dominating Oregon and Washington's offensive lines and those offenses aren't putting up a bunch of yards on you. I think it could be good. It definitely, you didn't leave the spring game thinking yeah, that's a big time put together dominant defensive line. You know, 2 deep depth chart is locked up there. But you saw, I think, enough flashes that there are some guys who are going to be major contributors up front. And you were playing without Tyrone Delaney didn't play, Solomon Byrd didn't play. So you had some pieces, Romello Height, we didn't see out there at rush end. So some pieces weren't there. I think you like a chunk of the pieces that are there. It's just continuing to develop that sort of edge that you're going to play with. What's the mentality that you're going to bring to every play when you get there in the fall?
Mark, was there enough pieces for you to make an observation of beyond expectations, status quo, underwhelming? Who'd you like?
Oh, they definitely upgraded the roster. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you saw Jamil Muhammad. His athleticism. He got in the backfield, created a fumble. He might be the answer at rush end if Romello Height can't stay healthy, or I guess we could say the same thing about Solomon Byrd. He wasn't able to participate this spring. That Corey Foreman experiment is over at rush end. Chris.
It wasn't over. He was still playing.
Well,
it probably should be over, Mark.
In theory,
it should be.
Yes, in theory, it should be over. You talked about, Chris talked about, and Eric talked about playing with the attitude. I thought Jack Sullivan had a play where he played with that strength attitude. Quentin Joyner, it looked like he was about to bust through the hole, and Jack just stood him up right there. Play was over. They both stood up. No one hit the ground, but it was that just brute strength to stop a guy in motion like that. That impressed me. So that's an addition. I mentioned Jamil Muhammad. There's still a missing piece out there that I think everybody's starting to feel pretty good about if he actually jumps through the portal hole into USC.
Oh, come on, tell the listeners who you're talking about.
If the Georgia defensive tackle Bear Alexander ends up at USC, immediately USC has found a missing piece to the playoff puzzle.
Agree.
Because now you are creating it too deep. You've got Keon Bars. You've got Bear Alexander. You've got Tyrone Delaney, who is trying to get healthy and come back and did, develop on what he did last year, which I think surpassed expectations. Anthony Lucas, by the way, he didn't have a tackle in the spring game. So as there was a lot of bright spots, but the defensive line still has a lot of room to get better. And, let's find out what it looks like in the fall. Chris did a great job of highlighting a couple of plays. For me, Solo was the best defensive lineman in the game, bar none. He had the sack. You could really tell he's developed his game. He's just not bull rushing anymore. He actually has some moves. So you got to, that's a tip of the hat to Sean Nua. He is, whenever he's working with guys on the defensive line, they're getting better. Hopefully we'll see that with Corey Foreman. So I'm good with what I saw. There was enough there. And again, there's another piece out there that if they can get that guy here, my gosh, that will plug up that hole that everybody is so concerned about in the running game.
Yeah, it kind of caught between beyond expectation and status quo. I like the first group. I was surprised that Anthony Lucas was surprisingly quiet in that game. I think Kyron Bars is a real stud inside, someone they've needed, and he can pursue. I mean, he was tracking down people from behind. Jack Sullivan is definitely a Big Ten type lineman. I don't know, and I think Chris pointed this out in terms of what he expects, whether he gets upfield to disrupt plays. But as far as stuffing a hole and being physical, he definitely fits it. And I have to agree with Marc Kulkin on this one. I thought that Solomon Tuiao-Pupu has continued to realize the uninjured version of himself. And if he can stay productive, I think that he's going to have a marvelous season. I really do. Corey Foreman, I know that Lincoln Riley says that he's doing really well and he's doing great, but you know what? And again, I'll probably take some heat on it, but again, a lot of it is coach speak. I understand it. I get it. I was a coach. But the one thing that doesn't lie, I'm not saying it's a lie, but you can see it for yourself. Okay, Chris pointed it out. You can see it for yourself. Corey Foreman, not a rush end. Is he big enough to play inside? That's the question for him. So I think we've pretty much gone over that. So let's get to the rush end position. Did you find their performance beyond expectations? Status quo, underwhelming? What did you think you liked, didn't like? Chris, Arledge?
I mean, I think we're still trying to figure things out over there. Height is still hurt. He's an athlete. I don't know what kind of football player he is. We'll see. Sam Green, I think, has a chance to be a pretty good player there. Jamil Muhammad may be a pretty good player there. But the fact that they continue to put Anthony Lucas out there, who's a really big body to play that spot. I know he's a good athlete, but I'm not sure. The fact that they're still putting him out there, the fact that Corey Foreman played so much tells me that the coaches still aren't sure what to do with that position. Because Corey Foreman's not the answer at that spot or with his hand in the dirt. He's not. And we can stop pretending that he might be. Anthony Lucas probably is an answer, but I'm not sure that a stand-up rush in is really his natural position. So I think, that's a spot where you really want a guy that the other side doesn't think they can handle one-on-one. And I don't think USC has that guy in the roster yet. I don't think they have anybody at that position where the other offensive coordinator is saying, we're going to have to chip him. We're going to have to keep a tight end in. We're going to have the back help. We're going to have to do something because I don't think we can block that guy one-on-one. I don't think USC has anybody at that spot right now that you would say, I don't think we can block him one-on-one. I think teams think they can block all those guys one-on-one. And so they're still looking. And I don't know that guy's on the roster unless it's a guy like Sam Green who could develop into something special, but he's just a kid out there right now. So we'll see. We're still searching.
Erik, are you searching? What did you see from the rush end position? Were you underwhelmed? Status quo? How did you view it?
I've been more impressed with Sam Green this spring than I thought I would be. Certainly this early on for him. I think he has a chance to play this fall. I don't think you're looking at him as a starter who plays 600 snaps or anything for you defensively, but I think he could give him a jolt up there up front. He's got energy, he's got power, he's speed, all that kind of stuff that you need from that spot. Again, I think it's like the defense. I think you've got pieces to be, pretty good to potentially, really good. I don't think you have that, like Chris said, you don't have that guy. It doesn't look like right now you've got that All-American 15 sacks, 16 sacks coming off the edge where you're going to get, Thule numbers from what he did last year and replace it with one guy. And the coaches have kind of been upfront about that. I don't know if we're going to get that from one guy. I think collectively we have to be better across the front, but from one guy, that's a tough ask to say, hey, we need 13 and a half sacks out of you and whatever it was, 22 tackles for loss. So I think overall that position is fine. That position can't be fine if you're going to be a great defense. And the coaches, that's Alex Grinch and Roy Manning, have said that repeatedly since they got here. That has to be our best spot. That has to be our most impactful spot on the defense. I think there's some with Anthony Lucas out there, and Lincoln Riley said this too, that the spring is about kind of let's throw everything out there. Now we've got a long time to take a look at what worked, what didn't work, what do we really want to focus on, what's something that we take into fall to do. Anthony Lucas playing rush end was absolutely, I think, one of those things. Hey, we need to look at this. We need to see if this is an option. I think he's a guy who can play both those spots and probably some defensive tackle for you too. I think he can line up kind of anywhere along the defensive line based on down and distance and the guys next to him and all of that. So he gives you some versatility up there. I think it's okay. I think it's okay. I mean, you had the forced fumble, which again is good. If you're gonna get one of those every game from the rush end spot, you're in good shape. And then you just never know in this setting what's a sack, what's not a sack. You saw a couple where they were kind of chasing quarterbacks out of bounds, and maybe they dive and land that as a sack. So I think overall it was fine, but you're not walking away from that going, yeah, that's the guy. He's going to be a monster this year.
Mark, what do you think? Are you happy with the rush ends and what you saw, or were you underwhelmed? What were you?
Well, I already mentioned it. Jamil Muhammad, he had that forced fumble, but I'm starting to, I guess the question is the rush end, if it's such a significant integral part of Alex Grinch's scheme, why are they having such a tough time finding the right player for that spot? I mean, they do so much cross training, they did in the spring, they did in the fall, guys just moving back and forth from Roy Manning's group to Sean Newa's group. Maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. But if it's supposed to be just a pure speed rush edge guy, Sam Green looked the part. I mean, he was flying around back there. Jamil Muhammad got there. Is Romello Height the guy? But I don't know. It's hard to tell because they put such a huge emphasis on this position, but I don't know if it has such a defined role the way they use it, or at least the way it's being described. So yeah, right now we're good. They need to find someone who's going to dominate that position, or find a different way to use their personnel, because if it's not going to be consistent, I don't know.
I think, Mark, the tough thing is you need a guy there who's going to go in the top 5 of the NFL draft. And if anybody could get those, they'd go get them, right? I think that's the difficulty. You got to land the talent. You got to land the big time guy or develop him, right? And so
Anthony Lucas going to be that guy.
It's a question.
I mean, if he is that guy, then he is an unbelievable athlete, because he is a big dude to be playing that position. I think, Braylon Shelby may do something there. Sam Green may do something there. I don't think you can count on true freshmen to dominate at that position, but you may have a couple of guys that have the athletic skills to develop in a couple of years into guys who can terrorize off the edge. I don't think any of the upperclassmen are guys who can terrorize off the edge. And Eric's right. Those guys aren't easy to find. You can find 4 of them in Alabama right now, probably, but they're hard for everybody else to find.
Well, there's no way that this competition has sorted itself out. I'm kind of like with Mark on this. They know what they want, but they just seem to not be able to find it. Maybe Jamil Muhammad is the answer. We'll see. Maybe I can't see it. Shelby as good as I think he is going to be, that he steps in and is going to be that big an impact player. So this is something that we're going to have to watch, because if it's that big a deal, I don't know if it's a scheme problem. Let's just leave it at that. All right, let's move on to the inside linebackers. Did you find their performance beyond expectations, status quo, underwhelming? What did you see looking at those inside linebacker positions? Who impressed you? Chris Arledge?
I think we're getting better there. USC's best linebacker was probably on the sidelines. I mean, I still think Eric Gentry is a guy who's a difference maker when he's out there. I think Mason Cobb can play. He can run, and I think he can play. Tackett Curtis can run, and he can play. He's also a freshman. And so, on that, you saw on that little swing pass, he took a bad angle. Why? I don't know. That's probably the angle he took in high school and absolutely blew people up. But he's not in high school anymore, and it's going to take some time to adjust to the speed of the game, just like it does everybody else.
Excuse me, Chris, just for cutting in. For people who are wondering what the play that Chris is talking about, it was actually Marshawn Lloyd and Tackett took an inside kind of angle when he should have met him further up field. And I think that's what you're talking about, Chris?
Yep. That was the play.
Yeah, okay, go right ahead. Excuse me.
Yeah. So I think USC, with the addition of Cobb and Tackett Curtis, USC is more athletic. If they continue to get improved play out of Rajon Davis, that's an athletic guy. And so I think they're going to have some athletes at that spot. But a lot of those guys need to continue to grow. Tackett Curtis is going to be a superstar, but he's a freshman, and it's going to take a little bit of time. Mason Cobb is playing in a new defense. It's going to take a little bit of time. Eric Gentry is hurt. It's going to take a little bit of time. Rajon Davis has underwhelmed thus far, but it sounds like he's playing better. It's probably going to take a little bit of time. So are these guys going to be ready by the fall to be a good group? I actually think there's a chance that they will. And I think there's a decent chance that Shane Lee, who is a fantastic kid and a great leader, and in many ways the heart and soul of that defense, is probably going to get less plays this year than he did in the past because he can't do the things physically that some of those other guys can do. So that's my guess. So they were okay. But I think it's going to be a pretty good group by the fall, and certainly by the end of the season, I expect it's going to be a really solid group.
Eric, are they just okay right now? Are they going to be solid? What was your view of it?
Yes. So for that game, I'm looking at the pieces, and you have 4 competent looking football players playing inside linebacker right now, which is a bigger number than we've seen the past few years. And I think that's it. They're not there yet. And I don't know if you have your absolute best 2 right now. I think Chris is right. Eric Gentry is going to factor in a big way when he comes back in the fall. And Brian Odom talked about him, and that was kind of his first time truly playing in the middle last year. He was kind of trying to figure it out a little bit as he went along. I think the expectation is that he's a lot better this year when he gets back in there and gets healthy. But no, individual talent level of all those guys playing there is probably, and Lincoln Riley called it, one of the deepest position groups on the team. It's probably better than it's been in quite a while at USC. And so I think you take what you saw from that game. It's not perfect. I mean, it's that what college football asks inside linebackers to do now is criminal with what you're able to do to them with RPO stuff, with these unbelievable little receivers dragging across the middle that they've got to pick up or jump in front of or do whatever. It is impossible to play inside linebacker. So expecting them to be perfect, play in and play out, it's not going to happen. So I think you're going to get more positive plays out of these guys because they can make more plays. They can make more individual plays. I think they're going to be pretty good. Again, like the defensive line, are they going to be elite? I don't know if they need another guy or like a big step forward. I don't know if it's there right now to be, talked about as, oh, this is a top 3, top 5 linebacker group in the country, but they could be pretty good. And I think you're going to see a guy like Tackett Curtis, because he's an older freshman. I don't know if he needs that full off season of playing and then developing like you see between year 1 and year 2. I think he's got a chance based on what he was asked to do this spring. I think he's got a chance to take a really significant step forward this summer and into fall camp as well. So I think you get a big jump out of him when Eric Gentry gets back healthy, Mason Cobb getting comfortable kind of in that group. I think it's going to be a good group. And again, you want to see it. You sort of given up on the anticipation of, I think we know what we're going to get because of last year and how things developed and certainly how it ended. So you want to see it, but I think you're okay taking the coach's word for, hey, we look a lot better. We feel a lot better. There's more confidence. Guys get it more. We're playing faster, all of that kind of stuff. Asking them to go out and run with Zachariah Branch and Taj Washington and those guys across the middle. That can't be a strength for inside linebackers.
Mark?
Yeah, that was going to be my main point. What sold me that the linebacker position got better in the offseason was, number one, seeing how much more speed Mason Cobb brings to the table. Watching him run laterally, step for step with Taj Washington on a drag route, that's impressive, right? You cannot overstate how difficult that is for a linebacker to cover someone like a Taj Washington in space on a crossing pattern. So that's going to help the defensive scheme a lot. Eric Gentry, I saw him stand right next to me at the last spring practice without his walking boot. And he's much thicker. And for Eric Gentry to be much thicker, that's 15 pounds. But that's going to help him a lot because his height, and now you start adding some girth to him. He's a unique player. That's your starting inside linebacker group, Eric Gentry and Mason Cobb. I have zero doubt that's what you're going to see in the fall. You know, Shane Lee, I think, sees the writing on the wall. He knows he's limited with what he's able to do compared to those guys. But then again, you add the Tackett Curtis, who once he figures out that, hey, not every play has to be a kill shot. And I'm sure Kyron Hudson really appreciates that he missed on that one attempt. You're starting to build up that depth. And again, Rajon Davis, Tackett Curtis, you now got 4 solid inside linebackers. And again, Shane Lee, you got 5 solid inside linebackers. Who have I missed? Who have I not mentioned yet? That's a great group. Let's keep going with it. And again, the guys have already talked about it. It starts up front. If those guys can, you know, stop guys getting to that second level, the linebackers are now fast enough and they play physical enough to make some plays. I saw Mason get downfield and body slam. I think it was Zachariah Branch who got loose. So there's enough physicality there with that group to feel good about going forward.
Yeah, I love Mason Cobb. I thought for me, he was the spring game MVP. Somebody's going to be sitting on the bench to open San Jose State, and it won't be Mason Cobb. I love the potential and spirit of Tackett Curtis. He's physically built himself up to play as a true freshman. He's a headhunter, as Mark said. Not every tackle has to be, you know, a decapitation. But he is still learning angles of pursuit and adjusting to the speed of the college game. I think the Trojans are in really good shape here. And if the front four plays well, that's going to be a good front seven. I agree with that. So let's move back to the corner positions. Did you find their performance beyond expectations, status quo, underwhelming? What did you see looking at the corner position, and which corner impressed you and why? Chris, this is right up your wheelhouse because you were a cornerback in college. What did you see?
Yeah, I thought it was a good enough outing. They played a ton of man-to-man, and they're playing man-to-man against a really good group of receivers. I mean, there are only, you know, when USC is going 4 wide and they have, you know, Rice and Branch and Mario Williams and Taj Washington, all these guys on the field, there are a limited number of schools that can man up with their secondary and those guys and not have at least 1 or 2 glaring mismatches. So I think the fact that you didn't see a ton of guys running free is probably a pretty good sign. You know, the first play of the game, I think we got turned around a little bit. I couldn't see the route on television because you couldn't see the bottom receiver. I assume it was a double move and Rice broke inside, maybe looking like a post and then came back out. I don't know. We got turned around there and then got a missed tackle. And so right off the bat, I thought, oh no, this is the corner play we've seen for the last few years. But I think overall it was a pretty decent performance. Jacoby Covington played well, and the coaches have been talking about how well he's playing. And they were without Roland Wallace, who probably has a decent chance to play a lot of snaps. So I felt okay about the corner position, and I think it's going to be a pretty good group in the fall.
Eric?
Yeah, check on Jacoby Covington, right? If all we came out with was you got a corner in him, I think that's a positive statement. And the fact that, like Chris said, they didn't play with Christian Roland Wallace, who is, again, maybe your potential starter opposite Covington, not having him out there at all, I think is kind of a blow to that spot, because if he's not a starter, he's certainly, you know, massive depth for you at that spot. Sear Wright, I thought, was, you know, okay. He got picked on a little bit, and certainly, you know, the pass interference penalties are going to be kind of an issue if those keep coming up. I think the expectation of, you know, is Damani Jackson going to go out there right now and be a lockdown corner after so much time away from the practice field and just kind of getting back into help there? I think he did enough to show, yeah, you know, down the line as he keeps progressing, gets another offseason in, I think you're going to be comfortable there. So the numbers that you have at corner, I think you're pretty pleased about. I think Covington has a chance to be really, really good. And at that point, if that's kind of how you're talking about the line, Christian Roland Wallace can play in this conference and is not afraid to go up against kind of whoever he's going to line up against. So the confidence, the experience there, the talent level overall, I think you like what you have at corner going into fall now. So yeah, and we talked about did the wide receivers go out there and absolutely dominate and blow the doors off? No, I mean we all talked about the wide receivers not having the best game. Well, the guys on the other side are certainly going to have something to do with that. So yeah, overall, it's like we've talked about with all the defensive spots, right? Did they go out and absolutely say, I'm an All-American, I'm the guy, here we go? Probably not, but I think they gave you enough to really think there's something to work with there, and that the coaches aren't just giving you coach speak about the physical development and the confidence and playing in year 2 and all that stuff. I think you saw a lot of positives.
Mark, do you see positives in it? What did you think about the corner spots?
Yeah, I saw a whole bunch of positives at that position. Erik, you nailed it. Jacoby Covington's going to be starting on one side of the field. There's no doubt about it. His size and speed and physicality and aggressiveness, you don't find too many of those guys. And I saw a little bit of that from Damani Jackson. What I didn't see was him attacking the ball that he and Ray Leak ended up wrestling for on the ground. But I did see from Damani a young Jacoby Covington. He's physical. He loves to tackle, and he does it with great technique. Not afraid to stick his nose in there. So again, you have Sierra Wright as a starter. We didn't get to see Christian Roland Wallace play. That position is too deep. We're going to be just fine there. I have zero concerns in the fall.
Well, that's certainly an encouraging sign. For me, Jacoby Covington stood out. Sierra Wright had his moments. The wild card is the health of Damani Jackson. If he's healthy and confident, he's going to be in the mix. And like you guys, I want to see what happens when Christian Roland Wallace steps out on the field, and we won't know that until training camp. But especially with the great Pac-12 quarterbacks and the way the schedule is positioned, it's going to be like unbelievable the last 6 games. If you throw in a Notre Dame in there with their transfer quarterback that they got that they're high on. So they're going to have to be ready. I really think they're really going to have to be ready. So panel, let's look at the safeties. What did you think of how they looked? Which safety impressed you, Chris?
Well, I mean, it was nice to see Christian Pierce come in and make a big play. I think the kind of play that we all sort of expecting him to make. Scott Schrader had been talking for a year plus about how ridiculously underrated that guy is, and he can play football. It wasn't a great day for the sake. Again, we didn't have a bunch of guys. We didn't have a bunch of guys running all over the field wide open. And if you don't have USC's receivers running all over the field wide open, then you're doing something right. So I don't want to be too harsh on this group. We had, the first touchdown. Our safety doesn't get his head around. He really needed to in that position. When you're that close to the goal line, the guy's not going to run by you. You need to get your head around. I'm still not sure that Mario Williams caught that ball, but and maybe the 2 plays that stand out in the game were 2 missed tackles by safeties. Both the Marion Peterson leaping over Shaw, and then you had Zamarian Gordon who just put his head down and completely whiffed on the spin move. But to his credit,
thank you,
got up and chased him down from behind in the middle of the field and made the play. So, I mean, if you're going to miss a tackle that badly, you really do need to hustle after the guy. But he did, and he made the play. I think that it's a position where they have enough bodies with talent that they should be able to make some plays there. Those guys have to tackle better than they did last year. They have to. You cannot have missed tackles from your safeties. A missed tackle from a linebacker is a problem. A missed tackle from a defensive lineman is a problem. A missed tackle from your safety is a 6-point problem. You can't do it. So are they better at tackling this year? I don't know. I don't know that we got enough of a look, but I know they have some guys back there that can cover, and we didn't see Zion Branch. I think he's going to impress. I know that Kalen Bullock can play free safety. I know he can do that and do it as well as anybody in the country this year. Those guys need to tackle better. I don't know if they're better tacklers than they were last year, but that's what we need to find out in the fall. Because if they're not, that's a problem.
Erik, the safety situation.
For me, it's going to be the same as kind of everything else. I think you saw enough pieces to think, okay, there's going to be a step forward from last year. I don't think you saw enough to think, yes, that's locked up. Check that position off. Everything's good there. Zachariah Branch caught the ball 8 times, and I don't remember fans rising to their feet as he's zigzagging across and making, 8 defenders miss and all that. So you did something right if you stuck with those guys. And really outside of the Lloyd one, there wasn't a lot of that, where last year it seemed like any catch, no matter how many defenders you were surrounded by, there was a chance the guy was going to end up running down the sideline for 60 yards. And so I don't remember a lot of, guys bouncing off tackles and just kind of sloppy stuff. Again, it's so, how do you get ready to tackle Marion Peterson in the open field without getting ready to go down low and hit those legs? And now you got a running back who can go over the top of you. Again, unfair for the defense in so many ways. I think again, the talent is there. I think you have a set up to be pretty good. You're missing Zion Branch, like Chris said. There's a chance he plays a huge role, and really at maybe a couple different positions at safety because of his size and versatility. Potentially gets moved around, and that lets your defense look a little bit different. I think it was okay. And I think it really was only asked to be okay. And I think they kind of did what they needed to do. Again, no alarm bells going off and no sense of, he's the best guy clearly in the conference and maybe one of the best in the country. I think there's high hopes for Kalen Bullock. Again, you want to balance that though. Yeah, if you end up with 5 interceptions, giving up a couple touchdowns on some sloppy tackling, that can't be like okay, yes, this and yes, this. You got to do both of them if you're going to be that guy for a big time defense. So again, playing with confidence, and you hear that from them a lot, right? We know what we're doing in this defense now, and that was kind of their talk about year 2, is the physical development, the mental development, all of that. I don't know if you definitively need a piece at safety, like you could still potentially use another piece at some other groups across the roster. So it's like the rest of the defense. I think you're okay. It's definitely a step forward based on addition of guys and returning guys getting better. How good are they? We're not going to know for a while.
Mark?
Yeah, they were okay. There's not a whole lot I'm going to be able to add to what Chris and Erik already said. Chris mentioned Zamarian Gordon. Look, you got to give the guy all the credit in the world for getting up and hustling and making the tackle, because what Marshawn Lloyd did right there, usually when you take a nosedive like that, you don't want to get up because you're already embarrassed the way you approach the tackle, but he hopped up and he ran across the field to make the tackle. So you appreciate the hustle and the don't give up attitude. But to Erik's point, these guys know how to ball hawk. They're gonna make interceptions, but I don't want to see my free safety running piggyback on the guy who makes the catch into the end zone either. So I know they're emphasizing tackling they did emphasize tackling during spring camp. It's just going to have to continue when fall camp gets here, because if they don't improve at that level, again, what Erik said, they're going to give up some big plays because they can't bring the guy down when they're not intercepting the ball.
Yeah, and I agree with what all of you said. I'm concerned about the tackling at some level, but this is definitely a group that I think has got some players, they've got some depth. We'll see how it shakes down. All right, let's conclude with what you'll be looking for in the special teams position. Obviously not a great deal to see, but was there anything, Chris Arledge, that stuck out to you about special teams?
Not really. I mean, they made 2 field goals. That was nice. And Zach Branch is returning kickoffs. That's nice. So, but you don't get, I mean, it's hard to work. It's hard to work kickoffs in practice unless you want to get guys killed.
That's true. Eric?
No, I thought Dennis Lynch coming out and hitting 2 field goals was big. I mean, based on last year, that would the opposite had he come out and missed those 2, it would have been, I think, a fairly significant talking point for us. And so I don't want to just glaze over, oh yeah, he made 2. I mean, that could be a big deal this year. I mean, when you're talking about needing to put up probably again as many points as possible, you got to be really solid in that aspect.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, he made both kicks 45, 43 yards respectively. So, you know, that's what you want. You just want to be able to have a field goal kicker who's consistent between 40 and 50 yards, because that's really what you're going to need with this offense. If they happen to get stymied somewhere. Look, if you're going to line up in a kickoff and it's going to be fair caught, then go ahead and kick it through the back of the end zone. At least show off the kicker's leg. Give us something to look at. But again, all we saw were 3 fair catches, 2 on a kickoff, and then Michael Jackson receiving a fair catch on the punt.
Yeah, I didn't think there was a lot to see. I mean, it was good to see the field goals were converted. Guy gave us a little bit of chance to see a new punter. But aside from that, like Chris said, you don't want to get anybody killed. So it's, it's something that, really over spring games, you usually don't see a whole lot. So we'll look forward to seeing how it develops during training camp. This has been a very productive review of the spring game. We've gone long. What I'm going to do is make an executive decision here. I think we're going to take the overtime questions that we usually do at the end. We're going to table those questions for next week's show. We'll get to all of you. Appreciate you sending questions in. We can spend more time answering your questions. So with that in mind, a reminder, if you have a question or comments for our panel, go to either of the WeAreSC message boards and click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle or listener questions. We can add more questions. We'll probably, maybe even be able to use some of the other portions of the show to get them in. So that does it for Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. Till next Tuesday, a big thank you again to our panelists, Marc Kulkin, Erik McKinney, and Chris Arledge. And a big thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have yourself a great week. And until then, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, reminding all of you to fight on, everybody.